All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Patriot Underground. Today is Monday, July 12th, 2021. Thank you so much for joining me, as always, to discover the truth beneath the surface. I am so grateful to have each and every one of you here tonight to listen and to partake in this great conversation, which I'm sure we're going to have. So tonight I'm welcoming Omega back onto the show. This is our third conversation, and we always have, well, the previous two conversations have been really interesting. A lot of folks have really, I think, benefited from the ideas that we've batted around and gotten some really great feedback on that. So tonight we're going to be talking about a lot of the issues that are front and center right now, a lot of the things that a lot of folks out there are curious about, wanting to get some analysis on. So we're going to get into a lot of different topics. So welcome, Omega. How you been doing?
Oh, I've been good, brother. How are you, man?
I've been doing well, been doing very well. It's been, I don't know about where you're at right now, but the weather this month has been very disappointing. It's been, feeling more like April around here. But aside from that, I'm doing pretty good.
Oh, and it's been hot over here. I mean, during that little hiccup that was supposed to be a hurricane, that they were supposed to derail the Trump rally. It just turned out to be like a tropical storm. Thankfully it was just that, but
yeah. Right.
It cooled down for a few days, like nicely. It was downpouring like crazy, some flooding, but it was nice. And down in Florida, it's brutal this time of the year. It'll rain.
Right. I forgot
off.
You're down in Florida.
It's today's just been on and off, so hasn't been too bad today. So thankfully.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot going on in the world, lots of things that I'm very curious to hear your take on, and we can get some discussion going. So I think, we were having a little bit of a discussion just briefly before we came on to record, just to kind of set the table. And one of the things that you thought about getting into tonight was the situation going on in Cuba. And I actually posted a short video clip on my Telegram today that was I thought it was pretty powerful clip. I mean, just thousands and thousands of people who had gathered. I believe it was at the Capitol, if I remember correctly. Thousands of people gathered in Havana around the National Capitol building. And it's a short little video. It's only about 15 seconds, but you can really see and you can hear the crowd and how revved up people are. And they're chanting freedom, freedom, freedom. So pretty amazing stuff. So what's your take on what's going on in Cuba right now?
I think something really big is going to happen with Cuba. I don't know. It's what I'm seeing is when all of a sudden they're rising up after being in a communist dictatorship since the 1950s. I mean, I'm sure they've tried doing a lot of stuff, but I think they're watching how it's going over here. I think there's white hats over in their country, obviously underground, and their underground resistance, and all these countries have some kind of underground resistance, and they have to be extremely careful of how they do things. But I think they're goading their government to start trying to mow people down over there, to red pill a lot more of them, saying, look, we have nothing else to lose. Like, let's I think you're going to see a rise of Cuban freedom come soon. I really think that's going to be the start of it.
I certainly hope so, because the Cuban people, as you pointed out, they've been under this terrible regime now for decades. And as you also pointed out, and I completely agree with, as things go in the United States, so they tend to go in the rest of the world. And as folks are watching what's unfolding here, and I think really, if what I'm told is correct, and I do believe it is, that people outside of the United States tend to understand and be far more awake than we are here on average. If that's true, I think it's very likely that folks are watching what's happening here and they're realizing what's about to happen. They understand the great awakening that's about to unfold. Maybe I'm sure many hundreds, if not thousands of people who are out there in the streets understand the election theft that took place. They understand all of the anomalies, the things that don't seem to add up. And of course, this is a topic that we're going to get into as well tonight, which is really what how much of what we're seeing is real and how much of what we're seeing is fake in a pantomime. And that's really a discussion where we could talk for hours on that topic.
Oh, yeah.
But I do believe that folks in other countries, especially in countries that really have histories of oppressive regimes, generations of living under oppressive regimes like Cuba, they see what's happening and they understand, I think instinctively and spiritually, that this is their moment to rise up. And I also agree with you that I'm sure that this uprising in Cuba, probably the timing of it is no accident as well, due to the white hat influence of what's going on there. But you also mentioned something about trying to goad the military into opening fire on the protesters. Or I think that's where you were headed with that.
Yeah, I think what's going to end up happening is that I think if their military is smart, they're not going to fully like open fire on everybody as they're saying they're going to try to do. Because because if a dictatorship like that generally won't even give you a warning. They'll just come by and take you, your family, and your closest neighbors and just put a bullet in you. I mean, that's what the KGB did in the Soviet Union. And I have friends that that lived in those former combat countries. They said that is the stuff the KGB did. They didn't tell people doing this. They didn't care. Like, oh, okay. You said an illegal word. Okay, your family, boom, 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 done. Some of them maybe sent to a re-education, some of them to the gulags up in Siberia.
Well, that's the thing. It's just that folks don't really understand how close we are to that happening in the United States. And that's really, I think, the frightening thing. I think you do, certainly. I think I do. I think most folks who are awake, most patriots understand and have understood this for a while, how close we are, how much of a razor's edge that we're on, really, towards sliding into this same type of government, because that's exactly the model worldwide that the globalists, the deep state, the cabal, call them what you will, implement, because it seems to fit their agenda perfectly. And that's exactly what they're doing. So the Cuban people, they understand they've been under this tyranny now for, as I said, for decades.
Mm-hmm.
And they understand what it's like to live under this tyranny. And the amazing thing is that how close we are to really losing all of our rights and slipping into this communist hellhole, and how at the same time so many Americans are just so completely unaware of how close we are, and more to the point, what that would actually mean. And around the 4th of July, of course, I mean, we're always celebrating our freedom, and it got me to do a lot of reflecting on our way of life. And I was talking about this a lot in our podcast, and it's amazing because our way of life is just so taken for granted by our own people.
Yeah.
And I just look at these folks in Cuba and I think to myself, how many of these people who are chanting freedom, I mean, what they wouldn't give to be in the United States, to trade places with so many of our own people here who don't even appreciate their own freedoms and don't understand the entire concept of freedom. They don't know what it means. They don't know how it was earned, how it was secured. They don't really understand what rights are and why they're so important to exercise. The only thing they really understand how to do is just get their programming from the mainstream media and just get outraged about whatever they're supposed to get outraged about selectively. But there's really no understanding of America and really no understanding of freedom. And it really caused me to reflect too. I mentioned the famous quote by Reagan, that I think it was Reagan, who said that freedom was never more than a generation away from extinction.
Yeah, that was Reagan.
Because we're so, and that's really I think, quite frankly, that's really where we're at. I think the place that Ronald Reagan was talking about in terms of our culture, in terms of our society, in terms of our general understanding of and appreciation of freedom, or lack thereof, I should say. I think that we currently are in the place that Ronald Reagan was warning us about.
Oh yeah, we've already crossed
beyond
the line.
it, really.
Yeah, we've already crossed the line. They just haven't changed the official government to that. But they have the underlinings already there. The way I see it is that people are waiting for communism 2.0 or fascism 2.0, which are really one and the same. They're just two different sides of the same coin. People get that confused too, by the way. It's like they don't seem to understand that Hitler was a closet Marxist, but that's just a whole nother story too. But what it comes down to is that we are already under a communist regime. The elite, the companies, the corporations behind them, that's their added help. This is where they got smart compared to 100 years ago. They have all these corporations today, hundreds, if not thousands of corporations that are doing exactly what Mussolini said fascism is. It's when the corporations team up with the government to oppress the people. We're seeing that
Absolutely.
now.
It's textbook. It's
That's
textbook.
exactly it. And here's a beautiful part about this is the fact that, let's say if President Trump was to be reinstated on January 20th, reinaugurated, we wouldn't see this at this level, and it would him be constantly on the defense. And the brilliance that I'm starting to see with the White Hat's plan is that they're letting this go on to a certain degree. They're not going to let this go on to the degree where the local police are going to be joining with the left and going door to door and taking whoever. They're not going to let it get to that point. If they do in some areas, then they need to reevaluate that part of the plan. But I don't think they're going to let it get to that.
No, that doing that would be contrary to their entire.
Yeah. At that point, now you're putting millions of innocent people at risk, but millions of those people are.
If they were going to do that, then they shouldn't have. Then there really would have been no point in showing any restraint at all.
So I think in some areas they're gonna try to test run this kind of gaming, mainly in the hard left areas where they've mainly disarmed people in the most cases, like New York City, that kind of thing. But they're certainly not going to be dumb enough to try it down, say, in most places in Florida. Even in like big cities in Florida, people are armed to the teeth down here. Same in Texas. Same in like Tennessee, all these places. It would be suicide for them to do that. And all that would do is just drive the wedge bigger and bigger. And it would get the talk of separation go more in the, further right in the Overton window. So they've been talking about this for a long time. I mean, we have Eastern Washington State and Eastern Oregon are literally voting on to split off from their states and join Idaho. This is nothing new. I mean, upstate New York, one of my good friends from up there, she sent me something that upstate New York is looking to divide into 3. And they're saying to have what it was called the Montauk region. I forget where else, not the Albany region, but it's basically New York City is basically going to be its own region. It's still going to be under the same governor, which personally I think is stupid. They just need to pretty much start a whole new state or just join, Ohio or something like that, because the New York state government is so far gone. I mean, it makes, in my opinion, I think it's worse than California. California is just, that's stupid. But New York is that thing so deviously slick that it's gotten so many people stuck there. And
I just don't. I mean, I agree with you that both governments are unbelievely corrupt.
Oh yeah. California is just dumb.
Yeah, and they're both
New York
children.
Is smarter about it. At least they've convinced a lot more people with more of an iron fist. California is just like, yeah, we don't care.
They just have a different style out in California, but it's the same type of tyranny. They just go about it in a different way, and
absolutely
more in accordance with the cultural differences on both coasts. But really, it's the same. It's the same group. It's the same
MO.
people.
Yeah, it's
really.
At
the end of the day, though, I believe that in terms of you and I have talked in great detail about the possibility of civil war. We've also talked about and of course along those same lines, states splitting off and secession and things along those lines. And I personally don't think any of that's going to happen, because I think that it would be contrary to what the White Hat plan had been all along, which had been to avoid having the country go to war and to fall apart. Now, I mean, is it possible that a part of what we may witness could be some sort of a simulation of that in order to give us that near-death experience to sort of add some flavor to that? I think so. But the way I look at it is that if we were headed into a hot civil war, And that was really the direction that we were going to be going. To me, I think that you probably wouldn't have seen any restraint on the side of really Trump and the white hats. And if Trump was in a position, knowing full well that if he was out of power, that we were going to essentially devolve into civil war, and Trump was in a position to actually bring justice to the cabal, and didn't actually bring justice to the cabal and left us hanging and left us, to fighting a civil war. To me, that metric just, those factors just don't really seem to add up. There would have been no reason to not just go after these people head on. If in the end, we were just going to allow the country to fall apart and allow, a civil war to take place. To me, it just seems contrary to, and again, could I be wrong about it? Absolutely, I could be wrong. But it seems as if, and you and I were talking a little bit about this, and we could maybe kind of shift gears a little bit too, but it seems as if with all the things that we're witnessing on mainstream media and all the anomalies, it seems as if the entire presidency of Joe Biden is a farce. Doesn't seem like it's real. Doesn't seem like it's the real Joe Biden. Doesn't seem like the Democrats are really in charge. It seems like things are getting more and more ludicrous on purpose, and more outrageous on purpose in order to wake folks up. And my contention has been really, if the Democrats and the deep state, really by extension, the cabal, were really in control, they would probably, their interest would really be in trying to scale back and trying to get everybody to fall back asleep, and try to get people to, in other words, I don't think they would instantly go after the Second Amendment and instantly start talking about going door to door and instantly start talking about mandatory vaccines. And all of these outrageously ridiculous things. If they were really in control, I think that they would want to scale back and they would want to try to put everybody back to sleep so that they could then start going about their agenda behind the scenes, which is what they've always done. But instead, what we're witnessing is a full-scale, full-court press for them to just cram their agenda in as fast as possible. And what it's doing is it's waking a lot of people up.
Yeah, I think they fell into the trap of trying to speed up their plans, because as many have said that they lost over 4 years of their Agenda 2021 and Agenda 2030.
Oh, absolutely,
whatever number they cut, Agenda 2032, then whatever idiotic number they come up with, the third world UN over here that is really an inept and incompetent agency, really, if you want to call it. Really, they're just a template for the world government. But really, they don't have the power like people think they do. They really don't. That's why they have to. Basically, it's the United States that created the UN, along with a few other countries. That's just an example there.
They wouldn't be desperately trying to cram through what was left of the deep state and their power structure. They wouldn't be desperately trying to cram through as much as they possibly could if they were actually in a position of power. They would be they're doing everything. Now this is where it gets really difficult for a lot of folks. And I think, you and I could probably agree on this. Even somebody like myself, and I'm not sure if you have really 100% the same opinion as I do, but my opinion has been, and my contention has been all along, that we're witnessing, primarily what we're witnessing is a simulation, so to speak, of what life in the direction we would have gone under Joe Biden would have been had the American people, stayed asleep and remained apathetic, and ultimately to teach us this lesson that this is what happens. This is the type of tyranny that you end up with. This is how you lose freedom. In other words, that all of this stuff is being done, in essence, to teach us a lesson, to sort of punish Americans and to teach us a lesson. And not only that, of course, have us come to terms with all of the horrific realities that we've been lied to about, and to some extent we've been shielded from by the mainstream media, by the establishment, and everything else. That's the one thing that a lot of people don't think about, is that so many folks have been able to shield themselves from the realities of things like child trafficking and adrenochrome and the really horrible satanic stuff that it's so awful. It's hard to even imagine. We've been shielded from that. We've been allowed to believe because the system has told us this fairy tale that more or less that this stuff happens, here and there in the shadows, but it's not really a major thing. It's really mainly an aberration. But in reality, human trafficking happens on an industrial scale, adrenochrome production on an industrial scale. The extent of what we're going to witness and what we're going to find out about is going to be so mind-blowing that I think in retrospect, a lot of people are going to recognize how the system, the establishment was kind of like, they did it all through lies and all through deception, but they were like this massive dam that prevented the truth from coming in. You know what I mean? And once that dam comes down and all that water comes flooding in, boy, it's going to be, it's going to be absolutely wild. But the thing that's difficult, I think, for a lot of folks as we navigate through all this is how much of what we're witnessing is real and how much of it is a simulation, how much of it is a movie or a pantomime, And even for somebody like me who thinks that primarily what we're seeing on mainstream media is is the deep state putting on a show. Is the white hats putting on a show for us and the final death throes of the deep state. I still sometimes struggle with being able to tell with everything that happens on a daily basis, is this something that's actually really a threat? Is this really occurring? Or is this something that just appears to be a threat and appears to be occurring in order to stir people up? And it's tough. It's really it's difficult to know.
Yeah. I would definitely say it's a mixture of everything. Because when people just say it's just a pantomime, they're partially correct. But the reality is that people should be taking this very seriously too. If they think, I know a lot of people that understand the what the plan is, or at least they understand what they believe the plan to be. Basically, it's the restoration of the United States Constitution, the original one. If I'm correct, that is what the plan was all along. A lot of people ask, what is this plan? I think it's a multi-tiered thing. It's a smoke out operation, like you say. It's and then it's to go into the phase of cleaning it all out, which we're still in the process of. It's still going to happen for a long time, but you could still restore the old Constitution along the way at a certain level, and I think we're close to that level. The Nasara Jasara, I think I'm hearing quite a bit on this lately as well. So I think what people need to understand is you could sit back and some days, have popcorn. Oh, that's funny what happened to, that deep state person. But at the same time these are cornered animals. And a cornered animal is extremely dangerous. It doesn't have any rules anymore. So people need to be hyper vigilant, especially now more than ever. And to be very, be very cautious of what they're looking at. There's a ton of misinformation that's coming out. They're infiltrating Patriot groups left and right. They've been doing this for decades, by the way. This is nothing new. So when people are coming out with, say they got a channel, started it, and 6 months later they're up to 500,000 subscribers, that's something to kind of keep an eye out for. Because I've seen some really good channels out there, and it still took them a long time to build up thousands of subscribers. They just went through the growing pains. That's normal. It's natural. But people are learning the lesson that people like me have been saying for years. It says, don't ever trust the FBI, because if you're joining some kind of prepper group, aka militia, and it's online, they have infiltrated those. I don't care.
Oh, absolutely.
100%.
Yeah.
100%.
They've all been infiltrated. Absolutely.
All of them, because they have informants everywhere. And I remember, being in some prepper groups and some really big ones, that there were people who had family that worked for agencies like that. Just coincidence, huh? And they gave us heads up on things, what to steer clear from. There were some good people in there that in those agencies that were actually trying to look out for us, but there were some really bad elements that were looking to plant very illegal things and then blame it on the whole group and then get everybody arrested. And then
basically every, you're right. Of course there are factions, of course, within every all the three-letter agencies, but particularly, the FBI. I mean, gosh, it comes out all the time that they're always involved in.
Oh, they were behind January
they-
6th, 100%.
Yeah, and not only
100%.
that, I mean, the CIA. I mean, you talk about worldwide. I mean, wasn't it? I think it was Putin who said that 95% of the terror, quote unquote, terror attacks worldwide are the CIA.
Yes.
I mean, that's just. I mean, and I think that the good news is that I think your average American, well, maybe not your average American, but more and more Americans understand that, and more Americans are understanding, I think, who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. And that I think is a good thing. Now, that doesn't mean I'm saying wholesale, FBI bad, wholesale CIA bad. I'm not saying that. Obviously, there are factions, there are groups within groups, but as a whole, I mean, we know what's been going on. And on the flip side of the coin, you've got the NSA. And the more we're learning about the NSA, and not only the NSA, but the Defense Intelligence Agency, the military intelligence, they're the good guys. And there's been this civil war that's been brewing now for decades. That not even brewing, that's been raging behind the scenes between these two different intelligence agencies. One, of course, hell-bent on the cabal's agenda, one being the cabal, right? Primarily the rogue elements of the FBI and the CIA who plan all of these things. And of course, as you pointed out, there have always been good guys. And the good guys have been battling back albeit behind the scenes, but this has been going on now for decades. So yes, I agree that people really need to take things seriously. I mean, the last thing that either one of us would be suggesting was that people should sit back. And I never really liked the idea of, sitting back and eating popcorn and that whole thing. I never really got into that. I've been pretty clear about, even though I believe that what we're witnessing is a movie, that doesn't mean that I'm sitting back and enjoying it and eating my popcorn and having a good time. I mean, maybe you might have said on the day of the inauguration, when we all believed that the Marines were going to storm in and arrest everyone, that may have been a popcorn moment. But after that passed, I mean, everything since then has been really painful for us, and it's really not been enjoyable. So to say that it's a movie or a pantomime is not to put it lightly. And I think that's very important to understand, I think, on multiple levels, on the level of being prepared, and also really just in terms of having respect for the overall process and understanding that, people are suffering out there at various different levels and to various different degrees, but especially folks who are awake and aware and understand what's been happening, what happened to their country. I mean, we've been watching our country fall apart. We've been watching our country that we love, that we would do anything for. We've been watching it be systematically picked apart and taken apart. And my contention has been that our patience, and the reason that it's been allowed to go this far, is because the Patriots, by and large in this country, I believe, are waiting on what's going to happen, what is going to be the end result. I mean, you could say that they believe in Q, but I would say even beyond that, what really is beyond even their belief in the Q plan, what is going to be the fallout from the audits? And I know that this was something that we wanted to talk about as well. We kind of pivot into this as well, but I believe that the audits, and I've been very clear about this is going to be a very, very major moment, not just in American history, but in world history, because we're going to see scientific proof of what happened and how the election was stolen. And anyone out there who thinks that that's not going to come out, or we're not going to get the details about that, is fooling themselves. We are going to get those details. The problem is that you've still got the Board of Supervisors over there, and just talking about Maricopa, you got the Board of Supervisors over there still playing hardball. They're still not handing over. I think the last I heard, there were over 300 servers that they're still trying to get, and they're still trying to get the usernames and the passwords and everything else. I've also heard that the Space Force already has all of it. When Trump says, we've got them all, we've got everything, that he's not kidding, that they've got everything, but they're doing it through, I guess you could say, a very stringent legal process, and they're making sure that they've got all of their T's crossed and their I's dotted, so to speak, so that they can be sure. Because you know that every attempt is being made to try to undermine, from a legal standpoint, everything that they're doing there. So they're being very methodical and careful, but at the same time, you've also got a lot of resistance going on. So when folks are just saying, well, you know, it should be over by this point. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, and when that day is going to be is anybody's guess. But I mean, I'm assuming it's going to be sometime in August. And we're going to get these results. These results are going to become public. They're not going to be able to be refuted. And so what is the mainstream media going to do? How is the world going to shift it? Because right now, where we are right now is an entirely different paradigm, an entirely different dynamic in the buildup towards the audit information coming out versus when it actually comes out. And I believe that when it actually comes out, that's when we're going to see the EBS. Because I think that the mainstream media, there's lots of different theories about this, about how are they going to handle it, how much of the mainstream media is actually captured by the white hats. You may recall from my conversation with Gene Decode, he was saying that it's about a 50-50 struggle. And that was in the beginning of June, that interview. So who knows? At this point, it could have gone either way, but it looked as if, and it seemed to be his implication, that the white hats were continuing to make inroads and continuing to, for lack of a better word, capture more of the mainstream media. But all that being said, how is the mainstream media, what remains of the cabal and the deep state and their power structure, how are they going to react once this information comes out? And of course, what are they going to do in the build up to all this, in the lead up to this information, to try to distract people, to try to, I mean, they're going to, as you put it, they're cornered rats. They'll do anything. They're very, very dangerous and desperate. So there's a lot of different variables and factors to consider here, but I think that once this information becomes public, it's going to be a total game changer, because at that point, I think we're going to see the momentum shift, because all of the people out there who are still asleep and are still believing that election fraud didn't exist, that didn't happen, and there's no such thing, and you know that it's all a conspiracy theory, and that it's an attack on democracy to try to get an election audit done, a scientific forensic audit, that's actually a bad thing for democracy. I mean, the people out there who actually believe that, their ignorance that's propped up by this behemoth, I think at that point, we're going to see a major, major shift in momentum. We're going to start to see people, because they're not going to be able to deny what happened. I mean, think about the people in your life. I mean, I'm sure, I imagine there's got to be some people, you know, that you associate with, who still believe that Joe Biden legitimately won the election, right? So what's going to happen when these people can't say that anymore? And not only that, they have to admit that Donald Trump won the election. And not only that, I mean, what's going to happen? What's going to be the end? I mean, think about it. You play through it in your mind even. You know, this is going to be a major watershed moment. And I believe this is going to be the moment where we're going to see, not all at once per se necessarily, but I think we're going to start to see all of the other information start to come out about all the various different arrests and all the corruption. And then, of course, all the layers that go, you know, much deeper and darker than that. So what are your thoughts on that? I mean, I laid a bunch of stuff out about the audits. And I mean, what do you think is going to happen as we approach, you know, August, late August, mid-August, whatever, and we get closer and closer to the audits? And what do you think is going to happen when this information comes out?
Well, to start with, I believe the psychology of the far left, and they don't have to be necessarily part of Antifa or anything like that, but there's people who have just such hatred for anything that's not part of the left, is that they, in their minds, they don't care what you show them. They will refute regardless. And they know for a fact that this thing got stolen. I guarantee most of them know that. They got their guy in. That's all they care about. The only
let me just jump in real quick though. What percentage of people do you think are we talking about here? The type that you just described.
I would say about 10 to 15, maybe 20% of the left, like the hardcore ones that have always hated the right, just because of. So
you're saying like 10, 15, 20% of Americans are going to reject. They're going to tell you that the sky isn't.
Yes, absolutely. Because I've ran into a few of these people. They don't care. They got their guy in. So for them to sit here and say is you're not allowed to do a criminal forensic investigation basically means they've admitted that they cheated. So they got their guy in. So no, you can't do that. You can't do that. Basically, is those people, you're not going to change their minds. But what the people you're going to change are even the moderate people on the left, and also the centrists, and even a lot of Republicans who just kind of just hand wringing over here. Oh, I guess we have to wait to 2024. Those people who are not really understanding really what's going on, because in their minds, it's America. This will never happen here. It's the normalcy bias. So on that end, in the psychology of that one, there are a lot of those people who do waking up. Even moderate leftists are waking up. Thank God. I would like more moderate leftists to come over at least to the center and start to see things from a larger view of life.
Well, that makes me think about, and I mentioned this before, but that makes me think about Patrick Byrne. I don't know if you heard me talk about Patrick Byrne, but this is a guy who didn't even vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah, he's libertarian.
He's got, he's a billionaire, didn't even vote for Donald Trump. And now he's over there more or less single-handedly funding the Arizona audit. Now, this is, that's heroic in my view. And the reason I bring it up is, why aren't more people on the left following suit? Why aren't there more people on the left who have integrity? What you just described, if 20% of our country are really that morally bankrupt that the only thing that they care about is that they got their guy in, that's frightening. That's really scary.
I think that's the grim reality of it. Yeah,
you might be right. You might be right. It could be that, that 20% of folks are like that, 20% of folks are like us. And then maybe 60% of the other, the rest of the 60% out there is, that's the big question mark, what's going to happen with all these people when all the information comes out. Because I think that my view is that your average American is a good person. I think on average, Americans have integrity. I've traveled a lot around this country, and I've met a lot of different people randomly. And most of the people that I come into contact with seemingly are very good, decent, honest, hardworking people. Doesn't mean that, I'm best friends with every single one of them, but most folks are good people. Most folks have integrity. Most folks don't have that attitude. Oh, well, the rules only matter if it's convenient. If that was the majority in our country, I think we'd already be done.
Yes, absolutely.
I absolutely think that we would already be done.
Yes, I
don't believe that a majority of folks are like us to the degree that we're awake and aware. But I certainly think that a vast majority of Americans have some integrity, because that's the only thing that's been holding this country together. And if these rats, in Antifa and BLM think that they're going to undo any of that, they think they're going to impose their will. I've pointed this out before. Yeah, they may make some noise. But I think when as soon as that fight gets real, have you watched these guys? I'm sure you watch these guys. I remember last summer I'd watch them. And of course they were all over the media loved it. It was like the greatest thing ever for the media. They got to, broadcast America burning down, which is like, that's exactly what they were salivating over anyway. And they get to broadcast over and show us all these images. But these guys are running around and they attack people in packs. They attack, there's like 20 guys, 30 guys, whatever, and they always attack like one person. And then the minute somebody starts swinging back, the minute somebody starts fighting, they all scatter like cockroaches. not to mention the fact, when you actually get people with real weapons and a real will to fight who are really going to shoot back and really hurt these people. These people, think about it. You really think that they're going to last in a fight? You really think that, I think that they're a bluff. I really do. I'm not saying that we shouldn't take it seriously. But what I'm saying is that when Americans, none of them have really been fought back against,
Yes.
None of them have really been held accountable. None of them have really gotten a taste. Some of the Proud Boys have, beaten some of them up and this and that, and good for them. But like, by and large, these people are thugs who are financed and who are paid to do this. And yes, some of them are really true believers, the real scumbags and whatever, they really believe this stuff. But a lot of these people are only there because they're getting paid to provocateur. So even within that group, you know, you eliminate those people who wouldn't show up when they weren't getting paid to anymore. Even within that group, I mean, yeah, that dwindles their numbers even more. And I just don't think that they, in any way, shape, or form. See, that's the thing about the mainstream media is they're still somewhat capable of convincing people. Let's just call it the 60%. They're still somewhat capable of convincing the 60% that their agenda and their ideology and their Antifa and their BLM and their Marxist crap is what the majority of people support and believe, because they're so well financed and they're so slick. They're able, with their mind control and all their different tactics, they're able to hoodwink people into thinking that this is what the majority actually supports and believes. And I don't believe it for a second.
No.
I think there are a lot of people out there who virtual signal. There are a lot of people out there and this and that who are afraid. They don't necessarily want to stand up. They don't want to say anything, but they don't want to see their freedom get destroyed. They don't want to live under tyranny. You know, when push comes to shove, are they really going to, are these folks really going to have the ability to shape our culture and our society? And to what extent have they even? I mean, I think that really what they've done is they've galvanized the American people, and they've really formed a resistance against them. And, you know, I think that when people look back years from now, I think they're going to realize that, these types of internal threats that we had, at the end of the day, what they did was they got Americans to wake up and to pay attention. And not just, and again, that's why I'm saying they shouldn't be brushed off and not taken seriously as a threat. I was saying more in terms of a fighting force, if it came down to an actual war.
Oh, yeah.
But in terms of their role in American history, I think the people are going to look back in the wake of this Great Awakening. They're going to realize that groups like this, what they really did was they just really pissed people off. And they got a lot of Americans to really wake up, because I don't think that most Americans support this stuff. I don't think that most Americans support, no matter what, happens or doesn't happen, they don't support burning down buildings. They don't support attacking random people. They don't support throwing rocks, through coffee shops and dragging people through the streets. I mean, I don't believe it for a second. I think that the media wants that. The media wants you to believe that. The media wants you to believe that everybody's that angry and up in arms. And yes, when they witnessed the whole incident with George Floyd, yeah, everybody was angry. Everybody was upset when they saw that video. Now, what really happened in that whole scenario and situation is a topic for another day. But that's what they do. The deep state, they cherry pick these incidents, whether they're real or whether they're not, but they're all false flags in the sense that they cherry pick these incidents to specifically pull on the heartstrings. I mean, with people like us, let's just call us the 20%. With the 20%, it doesn't really work because we see through the BS. When we see something on the mainstream media, even when we don't know the whole story, we know that something's not right. And whatever they're telling us isn't true. But for the people who haven't figured that out yet, that's what they do. They play on the heartstrings, and they get people to bypass logic by going straight to their emotions. It's a classic tactic. That's what they do, so that people no longer are thinking straight. That's why they've been able to get people to give away so much of what was fought for. There's so many of their rights that people fought, bled, and died for. That's why people have been giving them away. They were able to take away a lot of these rights or dwindle them down without firing a shot. And they do it through mass manipulation of people's emotions, because they know the cabal, they have absolutely no soul. They have absolutely no decency. They're completely hollowed out inside, but they know that we're not. Like, they can see they see a child getting strangled and tortured. That they get excited. They think that's great. I mean, that's the way they operate. But they also know that when we see something like that we're horrified, and then our conscience gets activated, and then we get angry and we want something done about it. We don't want to ever see that happen again. And we want justice and this. And see, that's what they do. That's how they're able to manipulate and get people to surrender and get people to not think about what they're surrendering. They did the same thing at 9/11.
Mhm.
You know, everybody was so upset about what happened at 9/11 that nobody really, there were very few people at the time, you might recall, there were very few people at the time who really stopped to question, you know, what were the implications going to be of the Patriot Act? What were the implications going to be of all these new infringements on our freedom that now we're supposed to just, we're told we're supposed to just accept them blindly, because if we don't, we're not patriots. And that's, of course, why they named it the Patriot Act.
Yeah.
And they, you know, that's why they do all of this stuff. It's all manipulation, but you know, more and more folks are waking up to it. Now, there's still a vast majority, I would say, I think, of people who don't really fully get it yet. Let's just put it that way. And they still believe the nonsense that they're seeing. But once they are awake, and I mean, I guess, you know, once they have this wokeness forced on them and they can't hide from the truth anymore, how do you think people are going to react? I mean, let's put Antifa and BLM aside for a second, because yeah, we'll see some stuff from them, but you know, how do you think the impact is going to go on the rest of the nation? I'm curious.
In terms of waking people up.
Well, no, I mean more in terms of, you know, once people are already woken up, once they've been jarred awake with the great reveal and all this, you know, let's just stay with the audits. Okay. Let's just take the audits, for example. How do you think that's going to be absorbed by the general public?
All right. I was going to get to the audits as you laid out a little while ago. With the audits, and I'll start from here. Basically, I think the audits, they're not fully disclosing everything just yet. I think it's timing with before Mr. T comes back, and I think they want to do this where it's going to be fresh in everyone's mind, and it just be basically like a blitzkrieg of disclosure. So in terms of how's the general public going to react? Well, some people are going to say, well, that doesn't surprise me, but we never had proof before, but now here's the proof. So that's going to force most states to diabolically alter their election laws, possibly even to the point where they may even have to put a lot more restrictions on voting. I think just so it's not easily, it's not so easy to defraud the public with. In terms of, say, machines, yeah, you talk about the quantum voting system. That's one mechanism, but how about the other? They have to scare the living crap out of a would-be criminal, of create deterrence of, if you do this, you're going to jail for 30 years or possibly even hang you for treason.
Well, yeah, I mean,
it was just one election. No, it's like, these elections can cause a civil war in the country, can cause a world war.
Well, I mean, I get what you're saying. I mean, yeah, moving forward, that has to be, I mean, all that stuff needs to be laid out, but I mean, that still doesn't change the issue at hand, which is something was stolen here. It's not just a small thing. I mean, the future of America, the birthright of America was stolen. The American people are going to be made aware of that. And that is going to have a massive, massive impact on the psyche of any American who's got any kind of integrity at all. And I do believe that there are a lot of Americans who have integrity, who have been hitting that snooze button, who have just been going along with the mainstream narrative all of their life because it's the only thing they've ever known.
Yeah.
But because they're too scared to look outside of that box. And part of me can't even judge them for that. But,
yeah,
I think that there are a lot of folks out there who fall into that category. Are there a lot of people out there who are, just certifiably nuts? Absolutely. But like we both agreed, that's in no way, shape, or form the actual makeup of our country. The majority of our country are good people. I think we agree upon that. And when good people are presented with the truth, and it's not just evidence anymore, it's actually the truth. This is what happened. A presidential election was stolen. A presidential election, which, by the way, of course, we've talked about before, how Trump verified with the Supreme Court when he was in office that if there was any foreign election interference at all, didn't matter the degree to which it was if there was any interference at all from any foreign power, that would nullify the election results. I mean, that's right there. We've got a obviously an unprecedented situation, a constitutional crisis. And people are going to be absolutely shocked by this, because I do think that they're, again, we keep calling the 60% tonight, the people out there, the masses. These people really do believe that this whole election fraud thing is a lot of these people really believe that it's really just a scheme or a scam. And imagine what's going to happen when they realize that it's actually the truth and that Donald Trump really won the election. Now, yes, there are going to be some people out there, the real scumbags who say, well, it's Donald Trump, so, whatever, it doesn't matter. The ends justify the means. Again, I don't think that that's the makeup of this country. I think that most Americans, that's not going to be okay with that, regardless of who they voted for, whether they voted for Trump or whether they voted for Biden. And I have to be honest with you. As much as I can't stand Joe Biden, and I don't even think it's the real Joe Biden, but on principle, if my candidate got in and I knew that my candidate got in by way of cheating and by way of fraud, I wouldn't be able to accept that.
Yeah.
And I have to believe that there are a lot of Americans out there who are good people who have been deceived, who have been they've been victims. They've been victims of the mainstream media, of the government, and for whatever reason, of big pharma, of big tech. I mean, the list just goes on and on and on and on, of history, of education. I mean, they've been victims by everything. I mean, they've been victimized by everything. Their entire life has been a complete fraud. Everything that they've been told about history has been a lie. Everything that they've been taught is a lie. Everything is an inversion. Everything's upside down. So to some degree, you can't even blame people. But I think when this information comes out and it's as clear as the nose on your face, and it's really going to come down to either you believe that the sky is blue or you don't, either you're certifiably nuts or you're not. I think that that's going to be a real wake-up moment for a lot of Americans. And I think that, I do think that, of course, that's going to be, there's no way that we can tell or predict ultimately how this is going to go, right? But I think that there's going to be a lot of things that are going to happen, in the buildup to the audit information, because as I've said, this is a really, really, really big moment in world history.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. And to gather my thoughts on the audit.
I'm sorry, I stepped on your last stuff.
No,
Go ahead. I'm gonna stop talking. Go ahead.
It's all good, man. It's all good. It's no, you know what it is? It's you get a thought in your head and you got to finish before you forget it. So I totally get that. And that's why I try to catch up on myself too. So I apologize if I kind of get off track on something. I try to catch up.
That's good. We're getting each other's brains going in different directions, which is the whole point, which is a great thing. But I want to let you get your ideas across too. So go ahead.
We're both extremely intelligent, and pretty high IQ people. So it's it's never just one-liners or anything like that, really, when it comes down to it. But the audits, understanding how 107 puts it, is the audits are not what's going to change things, but it's going to give the how this happened for decades, how the country was stolen slowly over time to the public. But that's not going to change it, he said. What's going to change is the military. And my question has always been, well, if the military keeps going around saying we're not going to get involved in the civilian affairs, but then at the same time is how are they going to do that? And that's where they have to be very coy about it until they make until they pull the trigger. I can understand when they're kind of playing coy, like, well, we can't do that, but you can rely on us. Like, well, what's one thing or another? The general public is like, what's happening? It's yes or no. And it's more complicated than just yes or no. Is of course they want to step in and do something right now, but they have to keep it according to their to their timeline of their plan. And President Trump is getting more and more bold. I listened to a little bit of last night's speech, and he said, boom, boom, boom. He said that. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Why is he's saying these certain one-liners for a reason? And he's given the cue. He's given the cat call basically to to the people who have been following him and understanding this plan that they've been putting through. So he's verifying what's going on. So a lot of people are like, oh, I think he's going to run in 2024 still. And I'm like, those people who say that, just forget about them. Those people are gonna lose their minds when it comes to it. Just be there to kind of help them out when it comes there and just kind of calm them down. Don't worry, the sky ain't gonna fall. Don't worry. The government's not gonna completely crumble. Chill. It's gonna be fine. We're America. We've been surviving for over 240 years.
Yeah, these are the Trump voters
Yeah.
that I've talked about that are, that are just, they have the right instincts, but they're not awake, and they're
Yeah.
going to be completely blindsided.
They don't think anything is ever going to be different than what they've lived, and a lot of them are in their, between mid 40s to, sometimes the 70, sometimes 70s. So they've lived a very long time with under the same type of system. It's very difficult to break people out of that normalcy bias. But now we are coming into a time of massive change, and it's actually going to be a good change for once in multiple generations, finally. So I think our generation, I mean, I just turned 40 back in May. Our generation, we grew up in a semi-free time, but people say 15 years, let's say that we were born in the early 2000s, they didn't grow up in a very free period. Post 9/11, America changed for the worse. So
no doubt.
we had a little bit of a taste of some kind of freedom, and for a good 10-15 years. But that's still like what we had back then is nothing compared to what we're going to have when the original Constitution is restored, and keeping the positive amendments, of course, because some people are like, oh my God, are women not going to vote after that? Like, no, of course they're going to keep the positive things, but they're going to have to get rid of the income tax. They're going to have to get rid of some amendments that are just flat out like stupid. You don't need to go vote in senators over here. They worked fine when the founding fathers brought in the system. You didn't vote in senators because they were appointed for a reason. The founding fathers put that in for a reason. Now, suffrage, it's good today. Women are very intelligent today. They're a strong force now for freedom. And we want them to continue to vote, because for, positively, women have been a driving force in progressing humanity. Absolutely. So some people would say, oh, am I not going to vote now? Like, no, they're gonna, because we're going back to the original Constitution. It doesn't mean that we're going back to pre-slavery days, pre-emancipation days. Obviously not. That's just horrendous. And I'm sorry, I wouldn't accept that. I don't accept anybody being enslaved in any kind of way, shape, or form. And that's just in the physical sense, but in terms of the debt slavery, we're all under that right now. And I think the elite know that their time is coming very, very, very short, and that's why they're kicking and screaming and, oh, we're gonna go send people to your door now and go do this. We're gonna put you on a secret list. I'm like, dude, I've been on a list since since 2013. Give me a break. If you people wanted to do something against me, you would have done it by now. It's like, give me a break. Millions of us that are just freedom loving people. We follow the basic common law of, basically the golden rule is treat others the way you want to be treated. If you want to be treated like crap, then you're weird. But
Well, I mean, the truth is that they hate all of us. They hate all of humanity. The cabal hates everyone, even their supporters. That's the thing that is going to really wake up a lot of people too, when they realize the depth of the evil and the depth of this, the deception, and the people who we're supporting. I think that these are going to be some of the hardest cases to deal with. They're going to be the people who spent their entire lives. And by the way, I know a lot of them and love a lot of these people. They're in my family. The people who spent their entire lives believing in this falsehood, believing in this system, and worshiping these people. I mean, I have people in my family. I know it may be a shock to some people, but I mean, I have people in my family who, they think Hillary Clinton is just a great woman.
Oh yeah,
I mean, it's absolutely amazing. So no matter, even in my family, even despite all the things that I've told them about Hillary Clinton, the things that I could even remotely tell them about, that are horrific enough. These, I mean, so when and again, because it's coming from me, it's a conspiracy theory. But once all this information comes out, and we can get into all different types of things that are going to come out. But I've been saying, let's just keep it in terms of the election. Let's just keep it in terms of the audits. That's just because that's one issue that no matter who you are, if you're an American, that issue is front and center. That issue should affect you. You live in a country, and then we're talking about the integrity of your voting system. And so that's going to be a big, big deal, I think. But the people out there who have just been spending their whole life wrapped up in this system, they're going to be some really, really tough cases to deal with. Because you talk about cognitive dissonance. I mean, can you imagine waking up one day and just your entire world, everything that you thought, everything that you believed, despite all the warnings of people that you chose to ignore, it turns out that everything is true.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, whoa. I mean,
Yeah.
This is going to be, and another thing that you talked about, I thought was great when you said that you had just turned 40, and folks that are your age, and like folks of that generation, and certainly folks who are older, remember a different time. We remember a time even growing up. And I've talked about this on my recent podcast where, I remember growing up, and I remember in school being taught that America was good. I remember, singing patriotic songs with pride, with genuine pride, before I even understood really what it meant to be a patriot. There was something spiritual about being a patriot, and not only just being, but just being a child, and singing these songs and being told that you're free. And not only that, but celebrating that. And we've taken that away from our children. I mean, that is just what a horrible thing that we've done as a society. We've allowed this system to come in and to teach kids the opposite. And just growing up, and everything was different. I mean, even if you go back into the 70s and 80s, and the movies, the TV shows, everything was different. Everything was pro-America. Not everything, but a lot of things.
Oh, yeah.
And it just, you're right. I mean, at some point, I think it was some point in the late 90s, early 2000s, and certainly post 9/11, with all of that stuff changed. But I think that, it's a shame, because so many young people are growing up now and have never had that taste of freedom. And I think that taste of freedom, even that 15 years or so maybe that you experienced growing up, is what you've been, whether you realize it or not, I've been drawing upon this entire time in terms of your own awakening, because you remember a time when you felt differently, even though you were a child, even though circumstances were different and times have changed and so forth, you still have always recognized the difference. There was a time in this country where we were at least quasi-free, where the cabal hadn't fully taken over, and we still had, a decent amount of patriots and leadership that were holding the enemy back. And we still had more rights. And not only that, but just culturally speaking, we lived in a country where it was celebrated, where patriotism and love of your country, and America being a good and noble nation. Yes, of course, we've had parts of our history that have been terrible, just like any other nation, not going into historical lessons here. But, the fact of the matter is that overall, anyone who really understands American history understands that America is a noble, good country. And overall, I mean, you have to judge it, you judge a tree by its fruit. And I think that the unfortunate thing is that so much evil has been done in our name through the cabal. And that's why so many, that's why America has had such a bad name all over the world. But I think even despite all that, I think because of the Great Awakening, because so many people, especially outside the United States, have awakened ahead of time, I think that they understand that as well. And they know the difference between the cabal and the American people. But the American people are really, they're going to have a lot of catching up to do. But, certainly there's still a lot of stuff that's ongoing. You and I talked about, I mean, we are getting more and more intel that there's still a lot of underground activity going on, a lot of earthquakes happening worldwide. They're still taking out dumps. There's still ongoing military tribunals. I've been told that there are actually ongoing trials in The Hague for crimes against humanity. Can't verify any of it, but certainly they're just, like we talked about, there are just way, way, way too many coincidences for anyone to sit back and say, well, things are just business as usual. I mean, anyone who looks at Washington, D.C. and does any kind of research at all and pays any kind of attention at all is going to notice massive discrepancies.
Yeah.
Massive discrepancies. There's so many of them.
Oh yeah.
Go ahead.
There's millions of people talking about what we're talking about right now. And we just, we have our different takes on it. You mentioned the earthquakes going on. I've been hearing in California that just been a bunch of them going on. Now, some would say, "Oh, it's California. We always have earthquakes." Well, as Gene Decode explains, the difference between a natural earthquake and a man-made earthquake are generally, I guess, usually like aftershocks and like depth and all that kind of stuff. Where I'd have to go back and listen to a little bit more, but.
There's P waves and S waves, and I believe that the secondary wave, the S wave, is the one that the unnatural ones don't have, if I remember correctly.
Yes, I think they call it aftershocks. Like I said, I don't know too much about all that, only just from what I've heard. But that right there alone, when more and more people are talking about that, that Great Awakening is very real. So we're definitely moving into a positive direction. We're going to go through extremely turbulent times, and I hope I'm wrong in the case that some areas are going to be hot zones. Some people who obviously think the most positive, or even they're like, look, there's going to be some hot spots. But at the same time, I think
I'd be naive to not think so.
And we're not saying we want that. It's better to be safe than sorry in that aspect. So it's better to be mentally prepared for the unfortunate events of the traitors in government and putting out street thugs and these kinds of things that cause mass chaos, letting out criminals in prison, like bad criminals, not people with possession of. Hey, they call a little weed on them and they're doing like 2 years. Like, I don't consider those people criminals, in my honest opinion. I think criminals are the people who are robbing people, rape, murder, subverting government, that kind of, I think those are the real criminals. And those are the ones that I'm very concerned about on the street. And not to me, but to people who are really unsuspecting. But to get back to pretty much going to what, the Great Awakening, is that I think the consciousness that Michael Jaco talks about quite often is that the consciousness is people truly want freedom. And it's not just in America, is Cuba. I mean, of all places we're going back to, is that if Cuba is waving American flags and they're like, they know how brutal the dictatorship is over there. And they're just like, screw it. What do we got to lose at this point? And I'm like, I've always had this feeling, and reading a few novels, that I think the United States is going to help Cuba be free of communism. I think that's going to be a new campaign in the next few years. I really think so, and that would be a noble campaign, in my opinion. Like, forget the Middle East. The Middle East is going to sort itself out at some point, but Cuba really needs some liberation, because those people. Down in Miami, from what I heard during the election, it was over 71% of Cubans voted for Trump. That's almost.
Yeah, Cuban immigrants have always been very heavily conservative.
Yeah,
and that's great news. And of course they are, because they've lived under it. I mean,
absolutely.
They listen to the garbage that the mainstream media is selling, and they see right through it. They've already ascended. A lot of these folks have already ascended, because I mean, there's nothing quite like experience. It's the best teacher, and these folks have already lived under it, and they understand that America is the last bastion. It really is. And I agree that we have to be, we certainly have to go, and we have to lend a helping hand specifically to Cuba. I agree with that. And I think it's wonderful to see all of these people waving American flags, but I'm sure you would also agree that we need to get our own house in order. And, that needs to happen first. And I think that we are, in my view, we're getting closer and closer. I think that the audits are going to be that pivotal moment. I don't think that we're going to see the audits come and go without some sort of a blackout, without some sort of an EBS initiation. I just don't see that the mainstream media, what's left of it, in terms of the, well, I shouldn't say what's left of it. There's still, it's anybody's guess really what percentage is really the cabal mainstream media, or how much of it's really been infiltrated. But putting that aside for the moment, I mean, they are going to do everything they can, but I just don't see them being able to weather that storm, because this has the attention of the entire world. And no matter what the deep state does to try to distract from it, and of course we can expect they'll continue to, as we get closer. And this is where I completely agree with you. A lot of things could happen, and we have to be very, very prepared as best we can to be able to weather this storm that we know is coming, because we know it's coming. To be unprepared for it that would just be negligent. And as patriots, we understand that we have to be prepared for this and see all the different angles. But I just don't see that this is that we're going to get through this whole audit situation, and that we're going to get to the other side of it, and that in any way, shape, or form, Americans are not going to demand that Trump be reinstated. I just don't see it. I mean, 80 million people voted for Donald Trump. And whatever percentage of those people out there, are believing the mainstream media that Joe Biden actually won the election, when all this stuff comes out, well, it's a very simple question. What are you going to do about it? What's going to be done about it? And that, I think, might be the point where we really see what the white hats have been talking about this entire time, which is Americans finally reaching that tipping point, finally on the precipice, or, folks have put it various different ways. But it's easy, I think, it's easier to be able to pretend that it's not such a, that we're not on the precipice of disaster. It's easier to pretend that, while the lie and the deception still persists that there was no election fraud. But once that lie disappears, what's left other than the simple, ugly reality that this election was stolen and that this president is illegitimate? And what happens next? And yes, we're going to see a whole bunch of, we're definitely going to see fireworks. I think we're going to see the blackout. I think that's when the EBS is going to come, because if we get beyond that point, if by some hypothetical scenario, somehow, some way, the deep state is able to somehow convince the American people that this forensic audit is fake and it's not real, and people don't take it seriously, well, I think at that point, really, you're going to have a lot of the things that we've been talking about could become more and more of a reality. I think if folks start to lose faith in the plan, or there being a plan, and I think that for a lot of people out there, I think the audits are a very, very big factor. I think people are really waiting on that to see, because if we're being honest, and as much as I am a cheerleader for Q, and as much as I'm a cheerleader for the plan, as I look at it from all different angles, and I'm not afraid to talk about, well, what if it were a Psyop? I'm not afraid to go there, because, that's one thing that people have wondered, and people are talking about. So I think to try to not talk about that is foolish. I don't think it is, but I do think that there's going to be a point where if the audits come and go, well, what's the next thing? What comes after that? There's nothing, really. I mean, what are we going to be waiting for then? John Durham? I mean, I guess at a certain point, there's only so many things. There are only so many markers out there that you can move the goalpost. And I'm not trying to convince anyone out there of moving the goalpost intentionally. I think people, for a lot of folks, they're doing the best they can to try to give people their honest assessment and their intel, which of course includes a lot of disinformation to keep the enemy off guard. So I think a lot of people are doing the best they can, so I'm not trying to accuse people of moving the goalpost, but in essence, that's what's happened, since the election was stolen and Biden, fake Biden was inaugurated and so forth. A lot of days have come and gone, and people are, with every day that passes, I think the anxiety sort of grows a little bit. And I think people are getting more and more, I guess you could say, impatient, a little bit, afraid that, maybe they've been led astray, so on and so forth. Then of course you've got the confusion about Trump pushing the vaccines. And even though a lot of people are out there explaining why he did that. There are some people who still don't understand it, and so are still starting to question Trump along those lines. So I think as the longer time goes on, the harder it's going to be to maintain faith in the plan and to keep the American people from, taking matters into their own hands. Because I do think at a certain point in time, like I said, one way or another, this election information, this election audit information is going to come out. At a certain point in time, the American people are going to know what happened. They're going to have irrefutable proof. They're not going to let this stand one way or another. So they're going to have to, either the military is going to clean these people out and they're going to set this country back on course, or the American people are going to have to do it. I mean, that's really what it's going to come down to at the end of the day. If it were to be, for me, my worst nightmare coming true, which is that, that this was a psyop and none of it is real. But I don't believe that. I really don't, because again, it doesn't add up with all of the evidence that I've been pointing out daily, pretty much on my show. And of course, everybody else has.
Yeah, I agree with you when it comes to the psyop part, because I've questioned that for a few years now. And for a while, I did think it was a psyop. It was, so there are a lot of really smart people. And then starting to see how certain events that were predicted years ago are occurring now. And also looking at how the deep state's reacting is if a dictatorship that's smart doesn't overreact. That's bottom line. They don't do that until they get 100% control, and they're not 100% control. They probably got about 50% control in terms of the financial, in terms of that, but they don't have us disarmed, and they're not doing a good job of convincing people to, to disarm themselves, because what are they going to do? Come after your kids next? Okay. It's gun confiscation times 10 going after your kids. So obviously this is definitely not a psyop in the terms of something negative. I think it is a psyop in terms of waking people up. It's because obviously it is psychological, but it's a good kind of psychological where, hey, wake up. You've been duped. Wake up. And instead of just a few people saying it, they have to live it. And it's exactly what President Trump has been basically saying all along, is people have to see it they have to feel it for themselves. And that's and for a while I was pissed off at a lot of people, but I'm like, you know what? I'm actually glad we're going through this now, only because of you start to adapt and you start to build survival instincts through this, because without going through these turbulent times, America was literally just going down to like a cock mindset of, just let anything happen to us. No, like people are now gaining back that patriotism. And I'm really glad to see it, even in places where I thought it was completely dead. There's a lot of good that's going to come out of this, I believe. And really, it's just like I said, it's a turbulent time. But I do think the worst part of it's coming to a close, though. They keep saying middle of August that the president should be back in, and I'm starting to believe that, because I did a video on I think on Saturday on that, and I just gave my thoughts on that as well. So I really
check that out.
Yeah, I went through a Restored Republic post real quick and just some thoughts. And go
ahead. Sorry.
I briefly talked about how the LGBT better wake up and disavow the pedophilia. They better disavow it now, because when all this stuff comes out and these people are tied to it, that's going to end up ugly for that group. That's all. Yeah. It's gonna. I've been warning this for a few years now. I'm like, they better stay far away.
When people realize the real agenda, that's just it. I mean, and that's one example. That's a pretty big example, of course.
Oh,
but
yeah.
That's one example of. Oh gosh, we could list all day long. I mean, the things, the different things that people support out there. That they think that they're supporting it for the right reasons, and then when they realize, I mean, it's just going to be completely overwhelming. The amount of information that people are going to have to process is going to be beyond their ability to process all at once. There's going to be a complete shutdown in terms of people. I think that there's going to be a state where people are going to just be in a state of shock. And when folks are in a state of shock, they just, they're perceiving things that are happening. They're perceiving reality, but they've almost gotten to the point where they just can't even process it anymore because it's overwhelming to them. And there's a part of their brain that just shuts down, and it really just a part of their psyche that shuts down. And I think that that's where a lot of I think the Patriots, our role as Patriots is going to be very, very important in terms of being able to help people understand what's been happening and be able to guide them along. But, I've always said too, if Q were a psyop, a lot of people out there who believe this, and I always say to me, if Q is really a psyop and the whole psyop was, as you're saying, to keep the American people docile and keep them from, organizing and forming a resistance and this and that. If that's what you believe, do you really think that when this psyop did you think it was going to just play out forever? Number one, did you think this was just going to go on forever and ever and ever, that the American people would be led around forever and ever and ever? Number one. And number two, do you really think that when the truth comes out that the American people are just going to leave it at that and just walk away? No. If it turned out that the American, if our worst nightmare came true, and by the way, again, for probably the millionth time, I don't believe this to be the case, but if our worst nightmare came true, and if Q turned out to be a psyop and Trump turned out to be a bad guy, or any combination of those things happen, do people really think that the American patriots are just going to roll over at that point? Of course not. So that would really, what would have been the point of the psyop to begin with? Because these people are trying to claim that or imply that the psyop was to keep people from fighting back. All it's going to do is strengthen our resolve at the end of the day. Sure, it's going to wound a lot of people if it were true. But, but people they're not just going to give up. They're not just going to roll over. They're just going to turn in their weapons. They're not just going to, it's not going to go that way. So why else then would there be all these drops? Why would there be these mysterious Q drops that would have the effect, as you put it, to be able to, to get us to wake up, in that sense of being a psychological operation, to get us to wake up, to get us to stop being cucks, to get us to start saying no to things, to get us to start understanding the way the world really works, and then to see over a period of years deltas to occur and things to actually come to fruition that were predicted. That's just way too much of a coincidence in my view.
Oh yeah.
So I believed in, as soon as I got really well versed in understanding the plan, I think it makes sense, even though I don't understand all the different aspects and avenues of it. I think that overall, logically, it makes far more sense than this whole idea that it's just this big psyop to fool the American people. Because there really is, in my view, there's no, my greatest faith is just in knowing that I'm an American, and knowing that when push comes to shove, that there are millions of people just like me who are willing to fight. We don't want to, but we would. And, and we're not going to just simply give up our freedoms. There's no way, shape. None of us are going to go quietly into the night. We're not going to accept living under any kind of totalitarian rule, and that's just the bottom line. That's where we are. So I don't think that this is a psyop. I think that what we're witnessing right now is and people, it's easier to believe that it's a psyop in this cynical world than it is to believe that we're actually approaching a moment in world history that it's just that there are no words to describe how epic it is, that the world is going to change in such dramatic fashion. And we actually are going to witness it. I truly believe that.
Yeah, that's what I'm excited about.
We're going to bear witness to this new world, and we're going to have the important role, both of us, and of course, all of our listeners out there, your listeners, my listeners, all the people out there who haven't discovered our shows. We're all going to be in that position where we're going to be leaders of this new world, because we understand this broken world that we're moving out of. We understand this dark world that we're gravitating away from. We understand the ascension. We understand the lies, the deception. We've already processed to some degree the horrors that exist below us and all around us for that matter, but certainly below us. We've already processed and accepted, at least to some degree, that we're not alone in the universe. But the rest of the world is going to, I mean, they're going to need a lot of help getting up to speed on that, brother.
Oh yeah, that'll come in time. I think. I think if the deep state doesn't try to roll out their little hologram alien invasion nonsense to come out, it's
Oh,
like,
they
why,
would if they could, but they don't have the.
it's like why would it come out right now when they're doing audits and all this kinds of things? Is how come not
Well,
during Trump's
Gene,
time?
I thought that might have been, some deep state, distraction sort of tactic there. But Gene says that, and I believe him, that the disclosure on UFOs and non-terrestrials is actually real. That's actually
Oh, I
white hat
believe that.
disclosure.
Yes.
And so if that's white hat disclosure, then that means that the white hats do have they've definitely captured back at least some portion of the mainstream media. Otherwise, that information would never get through.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So they're definitely priming the pump for something. I think that
yeah.
with this whole big reveal, there's got to be something there with the non-terrestrials for sure.
Do you believe that there is a galactic alliance?
I do, and I didn't know anything about it until I interviewed Gene.
Okay.
And he was very clear that, first of all, that we're not. I mean, it goes without saying that he's very clear we're not alone in the universe, but more specifically, he's been very clear that we haven't been alone in this struggle that we've been in. That there's a whole, I mean, probably we don't have time to get into it now, the whole history of how the alien treaties with the government and how it really goes back to the 50s and in Eisenhower, really in the 40s and the 50s, they started making treaties with the government. And there's a long history that's well documented. Of course, it's denied by the establishment, but there's a long, well-documented history of these treaties that we have with non-terrestrials. So I'm completely a believer in. I mean, I've been a believer in non-terrestrials for a long time. I'm a complete believer now of all the evidence that I've seen and all of the history that I've read. That this goes back really to the Greys, their original treaty. I believe it was. Gosh, I can't remember the years. I went over this all in my series on Agent Buried Alive, where it talks about there's a long history going back to the 40s and Roswell and the crashes that were really the non-terrestrials. They were fulfilling their role in the treaty, which was to give us the basic agreement was they were going to give us off-world technology, anti-grav, mind control, all these different things that the cabal, of course, has used against us, specifically the mind control apparatus. A lot of that, too, I talk about in Montauk that can be traced back to these treaties as well. But these technologies were given by the non-terrestrials in exchange for human subjects for genetic experimentation. Uh-huh. And there's a whole big reason and a long explanation as to why human genetics are so important to non-terrestrials. But in essence, to put it simply, humans are God's most ancient and first creation. And because of that, we have the original genetic code for all sentient beings in our DNA. And these non-terrestrials can use our DNA to fix their own genetic issues and problems. And of course, there are other reasons of why they want to harvest humans. Of course, we could get into as well. We won't do that right now, but
yeah,
darker reasons as well. But this stuff is going on. It's been going on for a long time. And I think, personally, I think it's very, very naive. I've always thought it was very naive to think that we were the only ones in the universe.
It is.
And I certainly think that with all of I've seen videos, I don't know if you have as well, but I've seen so many videos of UFOs. I mean, even before this stuff became mainstream, so many videos of UFOs and so many strange, bizarre videos of people just appearing out of nowhere, jumping through stargates. I mean, just absolutely amazing stuff. I mean, we're talking about some real rabbit holes here. You have to really, I think initially, to start learning about this information, for a lot of folks, you have to kind of suspend your disbelief and you have to just kind of go and do a little bit of research. And once you start realizing what's out there and what's been hidden from us, and the depth and the scope of it all, I absolutely believe that there have been non-terrestrials involved all along. In fact, I think that this whole evil plan, this whole evil plot to destroy humanity is alien. That the people at the top of these 13 bloodline families, I mean, you really want to get deep, you go back to the Garden of Eden, you go back to the 13 bloodlines, and, you know, their beguiling of Eve, Satan's beguiling of Eve in the garden and creating the 13 bloodlines. These 13 bloodlines at the top, these creatures aren't even human. They're reptilian.
Yep.
And so, you know, when you take all of these different things, and I could go on and on and on, but when you look at all of these different things, you start to put the pieces together. I mean, what's happening to the world, the cabal's intention to destroy the world. I mean, if you look at it in a religious context, you could say, well, it's, you know, it's good versus evil, which it is. But you could also look at it in terms of, you know, basically an alien force that is conquering another planet, another species, that is enslaving and ultimately conquering and trying to have it used to conquer, to get their breakaway civilization. That's exactly what they're doing. That doesn't sound to me like the plan, like something that a human would do to another human. Now, like that sounds more like the mastermind of that plan would be a non-terrestrial, a non-human that was looking to conquer humanity or destroy humanity. You know, so if you look at it, you know, you think about it in terms of like almost like a Star Wars or Star Trek type context, where you've got like one group of aliens trying to, you know, take out another planet or destroy another planet. But that's kind of the way I look at it. But they did it through infiltration over not decades, but over, you know, really millennia of deception and infiltration. And I think that when I started talking to Gene and he started to put all these pieces out there, I mean, at first when I started to learn, I didn't know about a lot of the stuff that he talked about. And then I went and corroborated and I looked and I did a lot of reading and research, and, you know, and you start to put these pieces together. So getting back to your original question, I mean, yeah, I absolutely think that there's a galactic alliance. I think that there are certainly, there are negative agenda aliens. And if there are negative agenda aliens, just like anything else in the universe, there has to be, you know, there are two sides, there's good and evil.
Yeah.
And I do believe that there are good aliens, non-terrestrials that are looking out and that are helping us avoid utter destruction. I definitely do believe that. And I certainly think that's going to become very, very evident, if not by outright disclosure of, yes, these are the non-terrestrials who helped us. We're going to have all of this technology. We're going to have all of a sudden, we're going to have anti-grav. We're going to have med beds. We're going to have, you know, all of these free energy devices. We're going to have all of this. I mean, this technology, it's going to be pretty obvious that it all didn't come from here. And folks are going to be able to understand that. And I think, you know, I'm interested too in finding out from Gene, you know, the next time I talk to him, which will hopefully be soon. I have to get in touch with him soon, but I'm curious to find out his opinion about how much is going to be revealed about non-terrestrials. You know, the extent, you know, of what the Alliance plans on revealing, because he's actually said that they were planning on doing more disclosure on non-terrestrials a while back, and that the deep state actually has thwarted it a number of different times. There was one example, I think it was in Paradise, California, that fires out there in California. And he talked about how that was actually a community of non-terrestrials who were willing to actually, I guess you could say, go public or come out or whatever, I don't know how you would really say it, but, you know, to basically reveal that who they are, and that there are a number of these groups, according to Gene, that have been here for quite some time. And a lot of them have, you know, certainly different distinguishable traits, but a lot of them look human. So, you know, how much of this stuff is real? How much of it is not real? How much of it is going to be revealed to the public? Anybody's guess. But I certainly, if you're asking my opinion, I certainly believe that the public's eyes are going to be opened up in a major, major way. And I think that we're going to be introduced to a lot of these non-terrestrial groups that have been allied with us probably for quite some time.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Well,
All right,
listen,
brother. Well, It's been a great conversation. It's been about an hour and a half. I just looked. Okay.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
why don't we wrap this up and we'll any thoughts you
Continue
want
off.
to?
Yeah, we'll continue off on the Galactic Alliance. That's something that's been very interesting to me as well. And keep up on the current events and stuff like that too, and as well to remind everybody, let's keep our eyes on the audits, because that's what's going to move a lot more things forward. And just keep cool heads, say prayers, meditate daily as well. Keep your consciousness, keep it as positive as you can, but not to the realm of hey, I could grow wings now. Obviously not. So, but keep
Yeah,
it to
no,
the
absolutely.
we'll keep it
Absolutely.
to I like to keep consciousness to the point of, what, we're all going to ascend to a better society from this. We're at a dark period right now, but it's going to get better. It has to get better. I truly believe it has to get better at this point. Like, I think we're down into the pits, and now the only way is up.
Amen to
So
that. That's a great place to end it on. Absolutely. All right. Well, thank you so much, Omega. I really do appreciate it. Another great conversation. We'll
yeah,
set
man.
up another one. Hopefully, folks out there really enjoyed this conversation, and so you can let us know. I think Omega is going to post this on his channel. I'll post it on mine as well. So let us know in the comments. Let us know what you think, and certainly support his channel. Like the video, subscribe to his channel, like on mine, and subscribe on mine as well. Do anything you can to support us, and we will do everything that we can to continue to support you, the American people, by bringing you these types of conversations, this types of analysis that cuts right through the BS and just gets right down to the heart of the matter and the issues that people care about. So thank you so much, Omega.
Well, thank you.
God bless, brother.
God bless you too, brother.
Take care.
Bye.